came out and did the same exact thing to us as they did this year. They were leading at halftime in last year's game. So I don't think there's any excuse. I don't like how there didn't seem to be a lot of energy with the team when they came out. And of course, it's demoralizing when your starting quarterback goes down, especially so early in the game. But
no one even knew who the second string was. I've been talking about for weeks with player availability. Coach Gundy's talked about the second string receivers, running back, defensive players. No one's ever mentioned Bullock before. And when he came on the field, all of my friends were like, who is this guy? And I was like, I could not tell you. And so it was really, the atmosphere at Boone Pickens changed drastically when Spencer went out.
Yeah, he's a guy, we're not going to pile on him, but
no.
He may need to take this game tape and just burn it. I mean, he had a really tough game. I believe he only had like 8 yards total offense in the 4 or 5 drives that he played. He's a guy that came in from junior college in the spring, so he doesn't have a lot of reps, didn't get to have a spring practice, didn't get to have much of a summer practice.
Exactly. Nothing was going his way.
But it's disappointing that Illingworth wasn't able to come in earlier. We may see some of his stats. Yeah, there they are. So he had 80% completion percentage and 74 yards. He didn't have a touchdown, but obviously his pass is what set up that touchdown that Chuba Hubbard ran in. And without him coming in, I don't know if we win this game, Alex. He's a guy that was a 4-star true freshman coming out of California. He's a guy that a lot of the fans wanted to see, and that was apparent when he came onto the field to rip-roaring applause. But again, it was disappointing that Gundy made that decision to go with Bullock over Illingworth, and I understand that there was not a lot of practice for Illingworth through contact tracing.
Yeah, he had missed 15 days prior of practice because I believe originally Illingworth is supposed to be the second string starter, but because of that contact tracing, Gundy was not confident playing him at first.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. Again, Alex, as I said, I'm disappointed in how Chuba played. Again, it's a lot to do with the offensive line not making holes for him, but
LD was able to make
LD
some
Brown,
runs for sure.
He's a guy that I've seen on Twitter has gotten a lot of traction across the country because a lot of people are saying that he might be a guy that can go to the NFL. He showed a lot of burst. He showed a lot more patience behind the line of scrimmage and being able to find those holes with Chuba struggling. Another guy, it's a great sign to see for all Oklahoma State fans, is Tylan Wallace.
Oh, yeah. That catch that he had that's what really, it was Illingsworth, second or third drive being on the field, and he threw that deep pass to Tylan, and he was able to catch it, which was really good.
I believe we have the pass right here. Yeah, here's Illingworth making that pass to Tylan. That's what got the offense really sparked. That's what really got them started. The next pass is when I believe they set him up for the touchdown. But it was a disappointing outing for the Cowboys. Hopefully they can bounce back this week in their first Big 12 game against West Virginia. Of course, we're going to talk to Adam Engel later in the show to preview that game. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the NFL and the Dallas Cowboys and their crazy comeback win. Stick with us here on Behind the Line.
Hi, I'm Will Joyce, the Mayor of Stillwater. As Mayor, it's my responsibility to help develop plans for a variety of resident needs, including roads, emergency services, and utilities. Some of those services are paid for with federal money that the government distributes to states and communities based on Census Bureau data. This is your tax money coming back to our community, but if you or your household aren't counted, we lose nearly $1,200 per person to places like Texas, Kansas, and Arkansas. So help bring that money back to local communities by filling out the 2020 census. This year, it's easy to do. You will receive a postcard in March 2020 with a unique code for your address. Using that code, simply go online, call, or request a paper copy of the census and fill it out. I want to make sure that you and your whole household are counted in the 2020 census. It's important not just to Stillwater, but to all of Payne County.
All right, welcome back to Behind the Line. Here, Parker here with Alex. All right, Alex, he's talking about the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. But first, let's talk about a few injuries that happened.
There were so many injuries. We could not talk about every single injury because I believe all 32 teams, if not close to it, had an injury of some sort. The 49ers-Jets game, that was at MetLife Stadium, so the Jets' home stadium. The 49ers are blaming the turf. It was wet, I believe, but they lost their running back. He's out for 2 to 4 weeks, confirmed. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo is a week-to-week basis with an ankle injury. And then their defensive end, Nick Bosa, is out for the entire season. Moving on to other key players, Giants running back Saquon Barkley is out for the season with a torn ACL, and then Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey is out 4 to 6 weeks with a sprained MCL. So it was just, this is kind of to be expected because of the lack of and the off-season practices and the shortened preseason, but it's just crazy. And, we talked about on Monday's show that this is detrimental to the teams and also the fantasy teams, because those are key players, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. And so all these NFL teams are scrambling to, fill these gaps.
Absolutely. It was a tough week in the NFL, and we'll see how they can bounce back next week. Hopefully there's not as many injuries. I do think that it has to do with there being no preseason. That really was a detriment to the teams. All right, let's talk about... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's concerning, too, because, what if this does happen with the college football players? Because they are in the same scenario as the NFL, and so we're just praying that all of our players can stay healthy, too.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. It was a tough day in the NFL, especially for some of the star players. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys. So they played the Falcons this past week, and for a lot of the game, we thought the Cowboys weren't going to pull it out, but they ended up getting a crazy game-winning field goal by Greg Zuerlein, Greg the Leg. Alex, what can you tell us about that game?
So
and here it is right here.
Here's the onside kick.
This is actually the onside kick, yeah. Go ahead.
So this is something important to note is that the rule is that the kicking team can't touch it for it to go 10 yards, but the Falcons could have touched it sooner. And that's what people are just mind-boggled over. So if you see there, the Cowboys players are watching it very closely, and then as soon as it crosses that 10-yard line, they bounce on it and are able to retrieve the ball and then score the game-winning field goal as the clock runs out.
What an exciting game.
Something that I think is a really cool stat is that teams in the NFL that had at least 39 points and 0 turnovers, which the Falcons did have, were 440-0 winning their games. And yet the Falcons lost this game.
I mean, it's almost like I wish that I could say I'm surprised, Alex, but we've seen the Falcons choke in the biggest game of all time in the Super Bowl. So this is a tough loss for Dan Quinn and the Falcons. They have a lot of guys that are talented. They have a lot of guys that are first-round picks on their offense. I think they have the most ever first-round picks on their team starting. So they'll probably bounce back. But it's a great win for the Cowboys, who are now tied at the top of the NFC East with the Washington football team. Going back to the injuries, though, Alex, what do you think is the reason why? Do you think that it's the lack of preparation? Do you think that it's the lack of preseason games? Why do you think that all these star players are the ones that went down this week?
So I think it is to note the 49ers game because it was, I believe they had at least 4 of their starters go out, and then the Jets had 2 or 3 starters go out. So that is most likely turf, and I think people are going to be looking into that more to see what could have caused that. But with Barkley and McCaffrey, they're the running backs, so they're running a lot, and those are both their knee injuries, which are pretty common for football players. ACL, MCL, the ones that you hear most about. It's tough to say because yes, they didn't play as much, they didn't have that preseason prep, but you could say that when you start the preseason, why aren't they getting injured when they start the preseason? Because they've had that long break, of the summer. So it's baffling, really, because they should be taking the precautions to, they're stretching, they're warming up, and they are stars. They've been doing this for years now. And so the fact that so many people it was a weird weekend for sure. First with Oklahoma State's football game against Tulsa, and then all the injuries on Sunday.
For sure. Hopefully these injuries start to go down with the more experience that they get, getting more and more playing time each week, and hopefully all the guys that were injured can recover. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about some golf, specifically the U.S. Open. Stick around here with Behind the Line.
Oh, there you go. Superstar.
The end of the practice is when we do all of our intensity drills.
Okay.
She was going at it.
Stop. If we get them to Detroit by, let's say Monday the 15th.
Whoa!
Right there. There we go. Yeah. Just, you can't.
Don't want to talk about it.
When you see the water tower, you're gonna make a right.
If we win this, we have one way to get to the playoffs.
I know.
Welcome back to Behind the Line. This segment, as Parker previewed, will be talking about the U.S. Open that happened this weekend. There were 4 Oklahoma State alum playing in this tournament this past weekend. Most notably was Matthew Wolff. Parker, just tell me about it. I don't know anything about golf, so fill me in on what happened.
Yeah, so a couple golfers from Oklahoma State, Matthew Wolff, Victor Hovland, and Alex Noren, they made the cut this week in one of the biggest tournaments in all of golf, the U.S. Open. It's one of the 4 majors. Here you see the graphic. These are what they these are their final scores at the end of the tournament. But this was played at a course called Winged Foot in New York, Mamaroneck, New York. It's one of the hardest courses in the country. And Matthew Wolff, Oklahoma State golfer, he was an NCAA champion, team and individual. He was a guy that had the lead, the 54-hole lead. So he had the lead after Saturday's round, I believe 5 under. And then on Sunday, he just had a really tough day, Alex. I believe he shot, can we get the graphic again to show? Oh, sorry, these are his highlights, actually. These are his Saturday highlights. But I believe he shot like something like 5 over on Saturday or on Sunday, losing the championship to Bryson DeChambeau, who was a guy who golfed at Southern Methodist University or SMU, who really ran away with the tournament.
Do you know if there's something like why Wolff had such a tough time on Sunday?
I think it boils down to pressure, Alex. This is the biggest tournament of his life. He was able to sleep on that lead, and I just think that he just didn't have what it takes. He's a really young guy. He's only 21, so excuse me. I'm not going to call it a choke because he's so young, but
Right.
I think that he'll learn from this experience, and he'll be able to come back and compete in Augusta at the Masters later on in November.
What else is next for him? He said, there's a quote by him that said, second in his first PGA, or in one of the biggest PGA tournaments, is nothing to, hang his head about. He's really excited about that. So, being able to go off of the 2019 NCAA championship and then coming in second at the U.S. Open, what's next for him? Ooh.
Yeah, he played at the PGA Championship back in September. And I believe he finished tied for 4th. So that was his first major. And then again, he finished second in this one. So he played really well. I hope that he continues to play well. He's a guy that has a ton of talent. He's just got to put it all together on a Sunday with the lead, Alex. Another guy is Victor Hovland. He
Yes.
struggled early in the week, but he was able to rebound into the weekend and play better. And a guy named Alex Noren. He played at Oklahoma State earlier. I believe he played like 2006, 2007. He's a guy that's older on the tour, but he was able to play well again on Saturday, finishing, I think, with the second lowest score to Wolf at 3 under. Again, they're showing that. The scores may show that they didn't do great, but again, as I said, that this course is one of the hardest in the world.
I believe Tiger Woods made a comment this weekend too, saying that it was definitely the hardest one that he's ever played at.
Yeah, and Tiger played. He did not play well either. He missed the cut this week, and he's never done well at Winged Foot. But
What makes it such a difficult course for all these golfers?
yeah, it's just narrow fairways. And like topsy-turvy greens just make this one of the craziest courses, I think, in America. It's one of the oldest, but a lot of the golfers will say that this is a tough course, and they'll say that this was a really tough week. They call it, they say that they're so ready to go away from this course and they're ready to be done with it. And I believe Matt Wolff is willing to say the same thing because it really turned him for a loop on Sunday. I'm excited to see what he can do in Augusta. I'm excited to see what Hovland can do. He finished as the low amateur last year at Augusta. When he still was a student here at Oklahoma State and golfing for the team. So he knows that course pretty well, and I think that he'll be able to play really well coming up in Georgia at Augusta. We'll see how Matt Wolff does. He's a guy that really has played well in majors. He's really played well when the spotlight is on him. Again, I said that he won the NCAA individual title, and so he's a guy that seems to step up when the spotlights are on. Unfortunately, he just couldn't get it done this week. A lot of OSU fans I saw were excited. They were excited to see what he can do, and they were a little bit disappointed, but as I said, he's young, he's only 21 years old. He'll have plenty of other major opportunities and plenty of other chances at U.S. Opens with possibly a lead to be able to get the job done.
For sure, we'll have to keep up with Matthew Wolff going into the rest of his career. Right after this break, we will have Adam Engel on to preview this week's Oklahoma State game. We'll be right back.
Oh, there you go. Superstar.
The end of the practice is when we do all of our intensity drills.
Okay.
She was going at it.
Stop. If we get them to Detroit by, let's say, like Monday the 15th. Time's right there. There we go. Yeah. Just, you can't.
Don't want to talk about it.
When you see the water tower, you're gonna make a right.
If we win this is the one way to get to the playoffs.
I know.
Welcome back to Behind the Line. We are here with Adam Engel. Thank you for joining us today, Adam.
No problem. Happy to be here.
All right, so this Saturday, Oklahoma State plays West Virginia here at home again. West Virginia is coming off of a bye week after they opened their season with a win over Eastern Kentucky, 56-10. What should Cowboy fans expect for this game? You know, who should we watch from both sides of the ball?
Well, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start with Oklahoma State players to watch. I have two players, of course, offense and defense. Both of them are Oklahoma natives, Dylan Stoner and Malcolm Rodriguez. If you look back a week ago, Dylan Stoner, 3 receptions, 14 yards versus Tulsa.
Right.
He is a leader of this team on and off the field. He is praised for his enthusiasm and leadership skills. He really stood out, though, as a punt returner. Remember that 36-yard punt return he had? And then his celebration after that just kind of goes to show his enthusiasm for this team. He is so happy to put on that OSU uniform every Saturday. But the other thing, though, his talent, I think, is overshadowed by that stacked Cowboy wide receiver core with, Tylan Wallace and Landon Wolf. But he is a very valuable player. I expect him to have a strong performance Saturday. Now, defensively, let's look out for the pride of Wagner, Oklahoma, senior Malcolm Rodriguez. I believe he will record another fantastic game. If you remember last week against Tulsa, 10 tackles, 2 of which were for a loss to go along with a sack, right? So I think Malcolm Rodriguez will have another fantastic game, and not to mention the defense, right?
Right.
There's
Defense as a whole is just-
there's Rodriguez, but what about Trey Sterling, Kobe Harvell-Peel?
Right.
Tanner McAllister had a wonderful game last week as well. So that's for Oklahoma State. Now for West Virginia, that's where things get a little interesting. The player to watch, in my opinion, for the offense is redshirt junior Jarret Doege, the quarterback out of Lubbock, Texas. Now, here's the thing. He is a transfer. He's played 2 years, his freshman, sophomore year at Bowling Green University in the MAC. In 2018, he led the MAC with passing touchdowns and passing yards. In the summer of 2019, transferred over to Morgantown, West Virginia. Took a redshirt, but he still was able to play 4 games because, remember, unlike basketball and other sports, football players can play up to 4 games and still maintain that red shirt status. But he had a monster performance 2 weeks ago against Eastern Kentucky, 19 for 25, 228 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. And the 4 games last season, 7 touchdowns for 818 yards with 3 interceptions. But here is where things get really interesting, right? The positives, his passing. But this is a very negative. Here's the kryptonite for Jarret Doege through his 2 seasons at Bowling Green and his redshirt season at West Virginia. He's played a total of 24 games, right? Rushing, negative 303 rushing yards. Let me say that again. Negative 303 rushing yards, sacked 50 times in 24 games. So with that, obviously for Oklahoma State, something that they need to do is get pressure to Jarret Doege because we know that he has a strong arm. We know that Jarret Doege can throw the ball. But if that defense plays like they did against Tulsa, it will be a long game for Jarret Doege. Now, defensively, to look out for the Mountaineers is Vandarius Cowan, a bandit. The bandit linebacker, similar to the Oklahoma State Cowboy back. It's a hybrid, right? A defensive end linebacker hybrid. He is also a transfer redshirt junior. Well, I mean, not immediately a transfer, but he started his career actually with the University of Alabama, right? So he started there as a true freshman, played 7 games as a true freshman. He transferred to West Virginia in 2018. Then he had to sit out as a transfer.
Right.
He was injured last season, so he started the 2 games. He started well, but against Iowa State, he was injured, and unfortunately, had to sit out the rest of the season. So he is coming back for a very healthy redshirt junior season. Now, 6 tackles in 2 games last season with a sack and a tackle for loss. He makes plays all over the field. If you remember, Week 1 against Eastern Kentucky, 4 tackles with the sack and a force. Vandarius Cowan is going to be a threat in the backfield for Sanders if he is healthy, or Illingworth in this OSU offensive line. They're definitely going to have a challenge.
Absolutely, Adam. So can you give us a prediction? What do you think is going to happen this week?
Score-wise?
Yes.
Okay. Here's my prediction, 27-17 Oklahoma State. And I'm going to be specific with how they score those points. 3 touchdowns, 3 complete extra points, and Alex Hale will have another fantastic game. Kicking-wise, he goes 2 for 2 from the field goal perspective.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Behind the Line. We appreciate all the viewers. Check us out at Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV, and Suddenlink channel 112. We'd like to thank Adam Engel, our OSU insider, for coming
Thank you
on
for
and
having
giving
me.
us so much great information about OSU and about West Virginia. Again, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next Wednesday at 2:45. Thank you for sticking with us on Behind the Line. Have a great day.
Welcome back, everyone, to week 2 of the pregame report. I'm Lainey Gerber, and across from me is Parker Terrell, as usual. And Parker, let's start off this week by recapping the Tulsa game for those of us that need it.
Oh, Lainey, it was a tough game.
It was.
It was tough to watch, especially in the first half. Oklahoma State struggled, and of course, we'll talk about the injury first and foremost. Spencer Sanders, starting quarterback, went down after, I believe, like 8 plays.
After the opening drive.
Yeah, so with what looked to be an ankle injury, and of course his status is in question today. But after that, the Cowboys brought in Ethan Bullock, and it didn't look great for Ethan. He was 8 of 13 with 41 yards and 1 interception with a QBR of 5.7. That's out of 100. It was tough sledding for sure, especially in that first and second quarter and going into the third quarter for the Cowboys. But we brought in Shane Illingworth, who what can you tell us about Shane Illingworth? I know that some people out there know that he's just a freshman, but
Yeah, well, he is a true freshman, first of all, so let's clear that up. And he is the first true freshman to play for the Cowboys since 2012. And he's from Norco, California, so a lot of teams haven't really seen a lot from him that are from around here. But he did really well. He came in with just under 2 minutes left in the third quarter when the Cowboys were down 7-3. And I know a lot of people were giving Gundy a lot of trash about not putting Shane in sooner, but he did miss a lot of practices because of COVID-19 contact tracing, so he wasn't even supposed to play. And if we put it into perspective, if we played the Tulsa game when we were supposed to a week earlier and Spencer still got hurt, then Shane definitely wouldn't have been able to play. So the game could have gone the total opposite of how it ended up going.
absolutely. And a lot of people were saying before the game that they didn't even think that Illingworth was going to dress out. So how bad would that have been?
Exactly.
I'm glad that he was able to come in. I'm glad that he was able to provide that spark that we needed just to get that extra touch, to get that one touchdown, to be able to win the game 16-7. I don't think we mentioned that, but a lot of things to work on the offensive side, especially the offensive line. I don't know if you watched the ESPN Plus Our Time documentary, but the offensive line surely was having a tough time, and at halftime they were struggling. Josh Sills was really kind of like lighting into them at halftime with an expletive-laced, tirade. But hopefully they can rebound today, and of course we'll get into that when we talk about the offense and make analysis. But defensively, there were a lot of positives, Lainey.
There were. The defense showed up and showed out, and in a lot of predictions I was looking at for the game today against West Virginia, a lot of guys were talking about the OSU defense and how they weren't as dominant as they were last week. Like, they held Tulsa to 7 points. I don't see why anyone would be doubting them. Like we mentioned last week, they're all returning. Yeah, it was going crazy. We keep going.
So, like, talking about the defense, Lainey, like you said, we held them to 7 points, and we played extremely well. We talked about it last week on the pregame show, how much starters we were returning back and some of the guys to look out for. But I was impressed with the defense. One guy, though, that I didn't think had as good of a game and has his potential shows is Trace Ford. He's a guy who we're really looking forward to have a huge season this year, especially in terms of sacks. And he didn't really show up too much on the stat sheet, but the defense as a whole, especially the secondary, truly held this Tulsa team down. I get that Tulsa is not the best in terms of offense. They were returning a lot of guys, and of course they lost their starting running back and best player. I forgot his name, Shamari
Brooks.
Shamari Brooks,
Yes.
yeah. So, and that was announced right before the game. And so without those 2 perfect passes by their quarterback in that one drive, I think that we shut Tulsa out. So
Absolutely.
a lot of positives, again, on the defensive side.
Yeah, and defensive stats can be kind of misleading, like, for example, Rodarius Williams had 2 tackles and 1 pass breakup, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but, I mean, you kind of don't. Like I said, defensive stats can be misleading because the reason why he only had 2 tackles and 1 pass breakup was because quarterback Zach Smith could not throw the ball to whatever receiver Darius Williams was on because he just had him on lock. So, yeah, defensive stats aren't always super telling. I do want to talk about the Tulsa game just a little bit more on the offensive side again, because something that we didn't mention about Shane that I think is very telling of how he plays as a person is that his first play from scrimmage was a touch fade to Tylan Wallace. And granted, we do throw a lot of fades to Tylan Wallace, but that's definitely not the easiest thing to throw in football. And I think that shows that he really knows just he knows how to read coverages. He knows how to read the field. He even threw to Jelani Woods, so he knows how to use so many guys all over the field.
Yeah.
And that touch fade also gave Tylen his momentum back last game after Allie Green IV had that interception against him. Tylen got that pass back right over him, and they were talking on the sidelines, and they were barking at each other.
Yeah, that was the highlight of the game, Lainey. That pass immediately when Illingworth came in. It really showed that he can throw the ball, and they're not scared to throw the ball. After Chuba was really, really struggling in this game. Another guy to talk about, going back to what you said about Illingworth and his touch fade, that just shows you how much arm talent this guy actually has. He showed that in high school, and of course, there's going to be some growing pains, especially if he starts today. We're going to see what he can do against a true Big 12 defense. But he's a guy that's got plenty of arm talent, and he's not afraid to sling it. He's a gunslinger, and he's been known to be that for a while. And I'm excited to see what he can do today if he does end up starting. And I know for a fact he's going to play a lot today. I mean, I've heard multiple reports that he is going to start, but Sanders might play. So nothing confirmed there. But another guy that I saw a lot of like ESPN, Fox guys talking about shooting up some NFL draft boards is LD Brown.
Yep.
He showed out in this game. I mean, a lot of people say that he's the second or first fastest guy on the team. And that showed. He worked in the offseason, bulking up, getting a lot more muscle to put on his frame. And he was able to find some holes and find some early yards. He had 9 carries for 63 yards, averaging 7 yards a carry. If we can form a two-way punch with Chuba and LD Brown, that'll take a lot of pressure off of Illingworth in this game, not forcing him to throw too much and maybe open up some play action later on.
Yeah, the thing about LD is he's been a backup his whole career at OSU. You know, we just had between Justice Hill, Chuba, he's been a backup, like I said, his whole career. But everyone on the team always talks about his personality and how optimistic he is. And even though like most guys would be frustrated being a backup their entire college career, but LD does everything with positivity and he's always smiling. And last week he said he was just out there playing football. And right now every game that we get to play every week is a blessing. So, and I think this season, especially now that teams have all seen Chuba Hubbard and they saw a fantastic season by him, and now they know that he's a Heisman frontrunner and he could get drafted really high, they're stacking him. And the Tulsa defense last week was utterly disrespectful to Ethan Bullock's pass game, and they were just stacking Chuba. And that's what led LD Brown to having to get more touches was there's the backup narrative for LD Brown. So they don't respect him as much. So they're not putting as much attention onto him as they would to Chuba. So I think we're going to see a lot more from LD this season that we've seen the past seasons that he's been here.
Yeah, and LD Brown had a really great run in that game that was called back for holding.
Yep.
And so he could have had a touchdown on that stat sheet. But as you said, a lot of people are putting too much stock into Chuba Hubbard's play and how he was only averaging 3.4 yards a carry. But that was because Tulsa was stacking the box. I mean, people forget Tulsa is still a D1 team, and they're going to have some guys that are talented. And when you stack the box, I mean, I don't know if Barry Sanders could make it through some of those holes.
Exactly. And Alex Hale, we didn't talk about him yet, but he was 3 for 3 in his first start last week. And so we were worried about that, and he showed up and showed out really well. So I'm really excited to see him get to keep going through. And he added, because we mentioned how OSU only had 1 touchdown. So he was able to add a 40 and 29-yard field goals to help us wrap up that win, which would have been even more important had Rodarius Williams not had that pass breakup. But we're going to send it over to Adam for Who Has the Edge really quick at the news desk. Adam, who has the edge in this game today?
Well, thank you so much, Lainey and Parker. It's a little split for special teams. So who has the edge punting-wise is West Virginia. Now, here is why. West Virginia, Tyler Sumter, their senior punter, a transfer from Troy University, a former Troy Trojan, a 2-time All-Sun Belt Conference punter. He averages 55 yards a punt, so he has Tom Hutton beat by yardage by about 14 yards or so because redshirt sophomore, 30-year-old sophomore Tom Hutton's average is about 40, so you have more experience versus a younger punter who has potential to be on the level maybe someday that Tyler Sumter is currently at. Now, something that we do need to probably keep an eye on is it's going to be a hot day, probably lower 90 degrees, but something to keep an eye on just for punting and kicking's sake is we're expecting about decent winds, about 14 to 16 miles per hour. And of course, with with that, it can go either two ways: boost the yardage or decline the average to lower punt distances. Now with kicking, of course, I'm going to go with Alex Hale. Like you talked about him, 3 for 3. He was lights out. He actually individually outscored Tulsa by himself last week. But so Alex Hale, 3 for 3. Evan Staley, West Virginia's senior kicker. He's obviously more experienced. Like I said, he's a senior. He has more reps, but he did miss a 21-yard field goal 2 weeks ago against Eastern Kentucky. So because of that, I'm going to go with Alex Hale. Now for kick and punt returning, this one is pretty easy for me to make. It is Oklahoma State that has the edge. Dylan Stoner, if you remember last week, he had a very electrifying 36-yard punt return that really pumped up the crowd. He had a great celebration, was cheering, and definitely boosted some momentum, injected some life into Boone Pickens Stadium. So that is who has the edge. So one more time, West Virginia has the edge punting-wise, and Oklahoma State has the edge kicking and kick punt returning. For that, we are going to go live to Boone Pickens Stadium. Alex Dusky.
Hey guys, I'm here outside the stadium for another home football game for our Oklahoma State Cowboys. It's about 45 minutes to kick off, so there's not very many fans out here yet, but I have seen a lot more West Virginia fans than I saw Tulsa fans last week, so that's definitely an interesting dynamic. As you can tell, it's really sunny. It's about 86 degrees, pretty windy, 16-mile-an-hour wind, so it's definitely keeping the temperatures cool, as it should be about 90 degrees at kickoff. It'll be a good game today for the Cowboys. It is unconfirmed who our starting quarterback will be. Last week, Spencer Sanders went out with that ankle sprain, and although he was in a boot this week, he did do some limited practices, and it's confirmed that he's on the field practicing, throwing some footballs. So is Shane Illingworth, so it is unsure who will be the starting quarterback, and we probably will not know until our offense comes out on the field. Some notes from last week's game is definitely how amazing our defense was. Coach Gundy said that he was never concerned throughout the game last week because our defense was holding Tulsa's offense to only that one touchdown, and he knew that they were doing what they needed to do and getting those stops. Another player that no one's really talking about that should get some credit is redshirt junior Alex Hale, the kicker from Australia. This was his first game for the Cowboys, and he was 3 for 3 in field goals and made the extra point after that touchdown. So shout out for him for doing his job for the Cowboys. It'll be a good game day today with the kickoff at 2:30, and we will be honoring the Thurman Thomas with the Ring of Honor, and I'll have more for you guys next time. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks for that, Alex. And like she was talking about, we still don't know who's starting at QB yet. Spencer was out there warming up and dressed out. I think it's going to be one of those situations where Shane will start, and then if things start hitting the fan and it's not going well, then Spencer will come in. I feel like we owe you an apology for last week, Parker, because you gave your score prediction last week, and we all made fun of you about how low it was. And you were actually the closest to the score. So congrats, and I think we owe you a little bit of respect.
Thank you, Lainey. Thank you to everyone here at the studio. I appreciate that. But I wish that I would have been wrong, Lainey. I wish that we would have just handled that game and just won like 56-17, but that wasn't the case. And of course, we're going to get into our predictions for this game way later. But you'll know, as the season goes along, you'll find out that I'm pretty conservative with my score predictions, Lainey.
Okay. I mean, I like to think that I am too. I try to be a realist, I guess, is the thing. But yeah, maybe conservative is not the word to describe my score predictions.
Talking about Spencer Sanders real quick before we send it to break. If he does decide to play, I think that would be a huge boost for the Cowboys. I think that his leadership and that presence really when he went out last game was lost, and that was part of the reason. I mean, a lot of things were compounded last week, part of it being I think that Illingworth is the backup quarterback, and when Bullock came in, because the team understood that Illingworth hadn't been practicing, that kind of led to maybe a psychological sort of down for the team. But I think that they're prepared this week, and because Illingworth has been starting in practice, and either way, I think we'll be much more prepared.
I think so too. If you saw the pictures from last week, Spencer, even though he came out and he was hurt, he was still rooting for the team inside the video room watching the game.
Absolutely.
It was really cute. And we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to go over Oklahoma State's defense in more detail. We'll be right back.
go. Superstar.
The end of the practice is when we do all of our like intensity drills.
Okay.
She was going at it.
Stop. If we get them to Detroit by, let's say like Monday the 15th. Right there. There we go. Yeah. Just, you can't.
Don't want to talk about it.
When you see the water tower, you're gonna make a right.
If we win this, it's the one way to get to the playoffs. I know.
Welcome back to the pregame report. Let's get into this defensive analysis. Key members from last week were Colby Harvell, Peel, Rodarius Williams, and Malcolm Rodriguez. Don't worry, we're going to talk about others as well. To start off with Colby Harvell Peel, he had 3 tackles and 1 interception. He showed a lot of diversity in his game. One play, he cut in straight to the QB, wasted no time to get to the running back, my bad, for loss of yardage for Tulsa. Others, he would do what safeties do, drop back into the field and follow their receivers super tightly. He had that late game interception. I respected that a lot because you never want to risk another like Central Michigan type incident happening that happened a few years ago. So there were 7 seconds left in the game and you don't think much could happen there.
Don't bring that up.
Yeah, I am most certain that Central Michigan play is on teach tape for the rest of Oklahoma State's career.
I hope they burned it. I hope they burned that tape. I don't know what you're talking about, Lainey.
I don't either. Anyway, but he still had a late game interception and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Talking about Malcolm Rodriguez, a lot of people are saying that he truly is the anchor for this defense, and
Absolutely.
he was last year. We talked about it last week. I think that he continues to be that anchor for this defense. He's a guy that gets a lot of guys in their sets, dealing with, of course, somewhat younger offensive lines, starting 2 sophomores in Trace Ford and Tyler Lacey. So he's Malcolm and Amon, both seniors themselves, Amon being a redshirt senior, are able to get that front 7 in line. And again, Lainey, for us to be able to come out in this game on top, the defense is going to have to play lights out like they did last week. Defense in Oklahoma State scenario serves as kind of like the equalizer to me, because today we don't know what the offense is going to do. We don't know if Spencer's going to start. We don't know if Shane's going to start. Of course, if everyone's healthy, our offense has the potential to be one of the best in the country. But right now, our defense, as they did against Tulsa, is going to have to lead the way, but things are going to be very different. West Virginia is a true Big 12 offense. They're going to have faster guys. They're going to have bigger guys. And, I mean, the defense is going to have to step up. A guy we don't talk about too much, Tanner McAllister, a senior, is actually one of the captains today. So that's something to watch. He kind of gets lost in the shuffle because we always talk about Trey Sterling and Colby Harvell Peel, but Tanner McAllister is another guy. He's a junior. I believe all of them are juniors. Yeah, all 3 of them are juniors in the back there. And I'm excited to see what we can do against Jarrett Dagey, the West Virginia quarterback. He's a guy that transferred from Bowling Green. Some of you may know him from his brother, Seth Dagey, used to play for Texas Tech. He's a guy that's been around for a long time, just like Zach Smith had last week, Tulsa's quarterback. So he is experienced, and he knows this offense, and he's going to provide some problems for this Oklahoma State defense, and they're going to have to step up.
Yeah, Daigie's arm is a big issue. He always throws for a lot of yards. So the pass rush is going to be key this game, and I think Malcolm is going to be the guy to do that. He's always all over the quarterbacks. Pass rush is going to be huge for him. And then last week he had a sack, and last season he only had 1.5 sacks. So he's already on pace to go past that. And I thought that sack was going to be a safety. Apparently they called it 2 yards out.
Yeah, this is like one of the last plays of the game, as they're showing here in the B-roll. That really, like you said, I mean, I don't know if it should have been a safety. I'm not an official. I don't know the rules that well, but that really put a stamp on the end of that game. After so much confusion and bewilderment throughout the game for the Cowboys, Malcolm Rodriguez is the guy that stepped up and, like I said, anchored down that win, ending that game. And you talked about a little bit about sorry, let me look at the rundown here. Rodarius Williams, a guy that we don't talk about as much, but he is, I would say, the most experienced, along with Amen and Malcolm, on this team. He's a 3-year starter now. Of course, he had his running mate, A.J. Green, for a long time. A.J. Green is now in the NFL with the Browns. But Rodarius is going to have a much different day this week going up against the West Virginia receiving corps. And like I said, they're going to be bigger, they're going to be faster, they're going to be more disciplined than Tulsa. And but Rodarius is a guy that is used to that. I mean, he's been playing in this system for a long time. He's played against these guys, so he knows what he's up against.
Yeah, totally. And if his stats stay as low as they were last game, then we know that it's because he's just all over these Big 12 receivers, which is exactly what
I
we
mean,
want to see.
he falls into that category of like a shutdown corner. So his stats aren't going to be great, but that's because quarterbacks are afraid to throw at him. So he's not going to get a lot of pass breakups or a lot of interceptions because they're just not even going to test him. We had that a lot of times with A.J. Green last year, being our shutdown corner, but we talk about it ad nauseum, how much depth this Cowboy defense has. I mean, Devin Harper, Calvin Bundage, who got into the game and looked definitely rusty last week. I mean, he struggles with offsides penalties, which, I mean, as a redshirt senior, that's something that just can't happen. I don't want to bash the guy, but that's something that he struggled with his whole college career, and again, it happened last Saturday. So hopefully he can get that ironed out. But again, talking about guys like Brock Martin, who played a lot last year but is now backup to Trace Ford. Talking about Brendan Evers, a guy who's also started a lot in his career, who's now a backup. Devin Harper, Bundage, Christian Holmes, guy who played in the SEC. All these guys are backups. So we have a lot of depth on this, especially in the secondary and on this linebacking core. That is what's going to win games for OSU to me. I mentioned it earlier. OSU's offense has the potential to be amazing and have a Heisman hopeful, and Spencer Sanders might be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. But this defense is what's going to win us some form of championship. It's the age-old adage, defense wins championship, offense wins games. But for a long time, Oklahoma State has struggled with their defense. But I think this year that's our strength, and that's what we need to lean on. And that's something that I see, like in that documentary of Our Time, I see Gundy talk about the defense. I see all the other coaches talk about the defense and how experienced they are and how they're going to lean into that. And that just gives me hope that that they're not scared of these high-powered Big 12 offenses that are coming, and they're coming very soon.
This defense is super competitive, not only on the field against other teams, but within itself. You know, really, if someone has a bad game and they bring in the backup and he has a really good game, the backup's going to start the next week because there's no reason they shouldn't be able to start because they're all so good. And the OSU defense did hold Tulsa to 0 for 12 on third down last week and just 1 for 4 on fourth down. So they were consistently able to get off the field, also avoiding long defensive possessions, which is obviously the goal for any defense.
Talking about strengths and weaknesses, Lainey. So the strength of West Virginia to me is their defense, specifically their defensive line. And I think Adam's going to talk about that later in terms of who has the edge.
Absolutely.
But so Oklahoma State's strength today would be their defense because West Virginia, obviously, that means that their weakness is their offense. So hopefully we can exploit some of those matchups. We can get Trace Ford, maybe some Calvin Bundage more in the action, getting after Jarret Doege because he's a guy, albeit experienced. I mean, he's not going to be a guy that is a next level guy. I don't see him really transitioning to the NFL well. He's just going to be a solid game manager quarterback that puts up a lot of really good numbers. But if we can get after the quarterback, that will bode well for the entire game, because that takes less pressure off the secondary. That takes less pressure off of the running back or off of the linebackers. So I think that's really the key today for the defense, is to get as much pressure on West Virginia and the quarterback as they can.
Exactly. That pass rush, like I said, is going to be huge. And guys like Malcolm, who was a state championship wrestler, he's easily able to wrap him up and take him down. And so that's just another strength that he has out there on the field. West Virginia's defense did hold Eastern Kentucky to 10 points 2 weeks ago, and their defensive line with Darius and Dante Stills is very impressive. So I think that's definitely going to be something that our line is going to have to watch out for.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more in the offensive segment, especially our offensive line going against their defense. But today, it's up to our defense to do exactly what they did last week: hold Tulsa, as they held Tulsa, hold West Virginia down, get some sacks on the quarterback, and give us a chance to maybe run away with this game.
All right, Adam, who do you think has the edge in this with this defensive core against Oklahoma State and West Virginia?
Well, I mean, you guys said it perfectly. Oklahoma State, and here I'm going to hit you with a few cold hard facts, or I like to call them cold hard stats. But here's the thing: quarterback Jarrett Doege of West Virginia. He's an experienced player, but like you guys said, this Oklahoma State defense was lights out a week ago with that pass rush. This man has been sacked over 50 times in 22 games. 50 times in 22 games, and guess what? Career rushing yards of over negative 350 career rushing yards for Jarrett Doege. So if Malcolm Rodriguez, Tanner McAllister, and Colby Harvell-Peel and company can get to the quarterback, West Virginia is going to have a bad time. It is as simple as that. You send your guys to the quarterback, and Jarrett Doege and West Virginia are in for a long night. Like you guys said, Tanner McAllister played lockdown defense a week ago. I was severely impressed with Malcolm Rodriguez, the pride of Wagner, Oklahoma, a local player, a huge fan favorite. And what's interesting is, like you said, I actually one of your players is a former high school wrestler. Well, Malcolm Rodriguez was a former high school quarterback and wrestler as well, but now he's turned into a solid piece for this linebacking core. And then the other thing is, we talk up front, you talked about Trace Ford, and then Parker, I just have to say something about Calvin Bundage. I do think you are coming off a little too harsh on the guy. If you remember, a year ago, he did not play a single snap, right? He was injured the entire season. He hasn't played in a year. He made two big tackles last year, one of which was a massive third down stop. So I think defense is a huge part of this game. And like I said, if the defense can rush to Jarrett Doege, the West Virginia Mountaineers will have a bad time. So who has the edge defensively? Oklahoma State. And with that, we are going to send it to Alex Dusky live at Boone Pickens Stadium.
Thank you, guys. So as I mentioned earlier, today is a really exciting day for OSU, as there's a new Cowboy tradition starting today with the Ring of Honor. Thurman Thomas is the first inductee to have his name etched up into the ring of Boone Pickens Stadium as a permanent way to remember how amazing he was for Oklahoma State football. He leads OSU history with the most rushing yards with 5,001 yards, and his most notable game was the 1987 Sun Bowl, in which he ran for 157 yards and 4 touchdowns to have a comeback win over West Virginia. Ironically, that's why they picked today, with us playing West Virginia later. The Stillwater community is super excited to have him back. There are welcome home Thurman signs all over town. Specifically, I saw one at Eskimo Joe's earlier today. And the way that the team is honoring him is that the team always wears one throwback uniform throughout the season, and today they will be wearing the uniform that he wore in that 1987 game. Thomas is one of 3 players to have his number retired. He is super humbled to be the first inductee into the Ring of Honor, and he's also really excited just to be able to come back into Stillwater. He loves Oklahoma State, and he's a very proud alum, and we're excited to have him back, and he's going to hopefully work more with the team and the university in the future. It's about 30 minutes to kick off. There are definitely a lot more Orange fans here today. We're excited for this game. You can feel the excitement building in the stadium around us. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. As we know, Thurman Thomas, a great running back, being recognized today in OSU's inaugural Ring of Honor ceremony. OSU has kind of been RBU these past few seasons with Chuba Hubbard and L.D. Brown, who we're going to talk about a lot later, right, Parker?
Absolutely. I'm excited to see these jerseys, these brand new jerseys that are honoring Thurman Thomas and that those 80s teams with Mike Gundy as the quarterback. And, of course, Barry Sanders was on those teams. But a lot of times, Oklahoma State look good, play good, Lainey. I know that there's been some, of course, outliers, but the last time that they went with these throwback uniforms was in 2018 against Texas, and a big upset happened in that game. So, I mean, I'm excited to see these old-fashioned uniforms, and I'm excited to see them honoring a great in Thurman Thomas.
If I were Oklahoma State, I would simply just wear throwbacks all the time because they always look so good, and we always play so well in them. And we're going to talk more about this offense, the running backs, and much more right after we take a quick break. There were some parts where you were like, thank you, lady. And here is Shane doing his thing with that pass to Tylen that saved the game last week. Shane did really well last week, as we talked about before. He literally won the game for the Pokes. He is the first true freshman, as we mentioned before, to start since 2012. And he finished 4 of 5 for 74 yards, which is not bad at all. And like I said, first pass of the game was a touch fade. Not easy at all. His passing game is going to be extremely important today, since that's what saved the game last week, and since Chuba's probably going to get stacked again, like we talked about.
Yeah, I think talking about Shane Illingworth here on our offensive breakdown now. We've moved on to the offense. He's a guy that's definitely more of a pocket passer. He's definitely more of a guy that's going to be back in the pocket, similar to OSU fans. You'll remember Mason Rudolph, guys like that. He's not going to run around a lot like Spencer does. But talking about that play, I believe that was the play where Tylen got tripped up like right at the end, or he would have scored a touchdown. I mean, that was like right off the bat, like you said, right after that touch fade pass. Maybe a run was in there somewhere. But I'm excited to see what Illingworth can do with his arm talent, as you said, in play action. We're going to get Chuba and we're going to get LD going early, and that's going to depend on the offensive line. Here's that play again. I mean, that safety for Tulsa, without him making that tackle, that was the one guy to beat, or Tylen goes to the house. So let's talk about offensive line, though, Laney. They're a group that struggled last week. We don't have to tell you that. Those that watched the game, it was definitely a struggle. The announcers of the game were talking about it all the time. People have talked about it all week long. I think this is going to be a statement for the offensive line, it has to be. Adam talked about how good those two brothers are on the West Virginia defensive line, the Stills brothers, and they're going to be wreaking havoc on whoever is the quarterback back there, whether it is Spencer, whether it is Shane, if this offensive line continues to break down as it did. But I trust Charlie Dickey, the coach, the offensive line coach for the Cowboys. He was at Kansas State for a long time, who is known to have, what back then was known to have some of the best offensive lines in the country. I trust Charlie Dickey saw some of the tape and talked to his guys, and they're going to have it figured out. I see this game, Laney, on the offensive side. If Shane is the starter, they're just going to ask him to be a game manager. They're not going to ask him to make any big throws. He had to make those throws last week against Tulsa because of how stagnant the offense was up to that point, and because we needed a spark. And I'm happy to know that he can provide that spark if we need him. He can, let loose and be that gunslinger, but that is not what we need today. Not in the Big 12 opener, not against this West Virginia team that is hungry after a really tough season last season under their first time head coach Neil Brown. They had a great game against Eastern Kentucky, and they're going to come out and they're going to want to hit somebody in the mouth, and that's OSU this week. So we've got to be prepared and we've got to be focused, especially on the offensive side, because that's what is seen as our strength. They know that, we know that, so they're going to be totally locked in and prepared.
Absolutely. The issue a lot of the times with true freshman quarterbacks is just the leadership. They come in, they're newer guys, everyone else is like a senior, so they feel kind of weird bossing them around. So really, I just want to see leadership from Shane a lot today. I want to see him talking to guys. I want to see him in huddles leading the discussion. We still don't know who's starting, but West Virginia head coach Neil Brown did say that they're going to prepare for Spencer since they've seen him and they have more tape on him. And then if it is Shane Illingworth starting, they're just going to adjust because they are part of the same, team, the same scheme. So they shouldn't have an issue adjusting so much, but they are going to have to watch his high school tape. So that'll be interesting.
So that's typically what teams do. Especially in the Big 12, when there's a guy, especially a quarterback, that's suspected to be out, they'll act like OSU is not going to give any information regarding Spencer Sanders' status. Of course, he's out on the field practicing. That makes West Virginia all week have to prepare for two quarterbacks. And as you said, Shane Illingworth has 4 passes that he's completed at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
And so you don't have a lot of tape on him, and sometimes that can be an advantage because, like you said, they're going to have to watch high school tape. High school is totally different than college. But, I hope that we can see possibly Spencer come in, hopefully we don't get to see Spencer. Hopefully he can rest that ankle and he'll come back next week against Kansas fully healthy and ready to go because, I don't know, Laney, if you've ever had a high ankle sprain, but I have had not a high ankle sprain, but just a normal ankle sprain, and I definitely was not have been able to play football in a couple of days or a week later. So get healthy for Kansas next week and on down the road. Hopefully Shane can keep that game manage strategy like I was talking about, and we can roll in this game without having to bring Spencer in.
Well, a high ankle sprain is a lot different from a routine ankle sprain. Usually, most people are out like 15 to 46 days for recovery, depending on the grade, obviously. Athletes, though, can range from like 4 to 6 weeks because they have to recover a lot more than the average person who's just trying to walk on that ankle.
For context, Michael Thomas, the extremely talented New Orleans Saints receiver, led the league in receptions last year, has a high ankle sprain. He's missed 2 weeks in a row, probably going to miss the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So if that gives you any indication in how severe this injury is for Spencer, it's not one to take lightly, especially considering a guy like Sanders, who is a mobile quarterback. He relies on his legs. He needs that full ankle support to be the most effective.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the other receivers. So it was talked about at last week how much Tylan Wallace was kind of kept out in the first half because that he was on a snap count. A lot of people were confused. The announcers were confused. But obviously, he's coming back from an ACL injury. He's going to be on a snap count against Tulsa. So that's why he didn't play much in the first half, and then he had to come in when we needed him.
Yeah, help save the game.
And yeah, so Tylan is back. He looked healthy. He looked like coming out of his cuts. I mean, obviously he in this catch, as you see right here, I mean, he looks to be back to his old self, which is a great news. But the other receivers are who we talked about last week. Guys like D. Anderson, guys like Landon Wolf, guys like Brendan Presley and Tay Martin. We had those guys as like our players to watch, and they hardly got any snaps last week.
Yeah.
Chalk that up to Bullock not being experienced and not being as good of a passer. But I think because Illingworth has been practicing all this week, they're going to open up the offense in the passing game a lot more if they have to. Now, I said that he needs to be a game manager. That can entail, spreading the ball out to multiple guys and not having to key in on Tylan.
Absolutely.
That's something that OSU has the advantage over, I would say, 99% of everyone in the country, because they have so many guys that they can throw the ball to. They don't have to rely on just Chuba, and now they don't have to rely on just LD Brown and Chuba. So I'm excited to see how we can spread the ball around a little bit more. That's something that Gundy talked about last week. We need to spread the ball out a little bit more because we have so many talented guys.
Yeah.
And that's how you spread out a defense like West Virginia that is built to stop this spread offense, as most Big 12 defenses are.
And we got a preview of that last week when Shane did pass to Jelani Woods. West Virginia, their defense also didn't see Tylan Wallace last year because Tylan was out with his ACL injury. And when Neil Brown was asked about having to face Tylan for the first time, he didn't really have an answer or a preparation for it. He said that Tylan is special, and when it comes to guys like Tylan, you have your safeties all over them, and you just hope that they can do their job really well. And that's his whole plan for it. It's difficult to prep for a guy like Tylan because he is so special, and that's exactly what he used to describe.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about with the other guys having to step up. They're going to double cover Tylan Wallace. Newsflash to all those out there. They would be dumb not to. So that means Dylan Stoner. That means Braden Johnson. That's guys like Landon Wolf, as I mentioned, are going to have to step up. I do think that it's not being talked about enough. This was Casey Dunn's first game calling plays for Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I'm sure that he did not expect his starting quarterback to go down after the first drive. So he's a guy, or Casey Dunn is looking to open up this offense. They talked about all offseason how they want to get the Cowboy backs like Jelani Woods, like Logan Carter more involved. And I think that this is that opportunity, whether it's Sanders or Illingworth starting, because, again, there's a lot more preparation that has gone into this week with a different quarterback. I'm excited to see what Casey Dunn can do this week with more preparation, and hopefully we see him open up the playbook a little bit more for whomever is starting at quarterback.
And as far as West Virginia's offense goes, Jarrett Dagey did see OSU last year. He did start against them last season. He passed for 307 yards last season, which is why we said that pass defense is going to be so big this game.
Yeah.
And he scored 56 on Eastern Kentucky 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
So-
West Virginia plays a very cookie-cutter and vanilla offense, but it's effective. I mean, they get a lot of yards, as you mentioned, but they're just kind of a basic spread type of offense that rely on the quarterback to make really good decisions. We saw that a couple of years ago with Will Grier at West Virginia, and of course now we see it with Dagey, who I think is the most talented quarterback that they've had since Will Grier. So this West Virginia offense, while being cookie-cutter and vanilla, is something to watch out for because, again, they know what they're doing on that side of the ball.
Absolutely. And our key players for last game, and I think really every game, our key players are going to be Spencer, unless he's hurt and we find out that he's going to be out for a long time, and then it'll probably be Shane, Chuba, and Tylan, just because the whole narrative around the OSU football team really
The
follows
triplets,
them.
if you will.
Exactly. I like it. But players to watch out for today are definitely going to be Shane Illingworth and LD Brown for sure. Adam, who do you think we need to be watching out for today, and who has the edge in this game?
Well, someone that we do need to be watching out for offensively, quarterback. If Spencer Sanders does not play, the person who has the edge for the quarterbacks is West Virginia's Jarret Doege. Now, here's why. He is, well, like I said, rushing yards is huge downside, but this man throws the ball. He has a very strong arm. When he played at Bowling Green University in the MAC conference in 2018, he led the MAC both in passing yards and passing touchdowns. He is a very strong quarterback, can step up. Like I said, not great as a rusher to rush out of the pocket, but has a great arm, can chuck it downfield. A season ago, his redshirt season, so he transferred to Morgantown, West Virginia in the summer of 2019. He did play 4 games, even though he was a redshirt, because in football, unlike basketball and other sports, players can play up to 4 games and still maintain that redshirt status in 2019. Doege, 7 touchdowns, 818 yards, and 3 interceptions. So 4 games last year, and then even before that, he was a key part of both the Bowling Green Falcons offense. And then if we talked about it earlier, 2 weeks ago against Eastern Kentucky of the FCS, 3 touchdowns, 19 for 25, and 228 yards. That is stellar numbers. Of course, the quarterback situation for Oklahoma State is very much up in the air. Who knows if Spencer Sanders is active, if he will be ready to play. But Shane Illingworth is a good backup option, as we saw last game. And of course, like you said, Parker, the 1-2 punch, just a deadly punch at the running back position. Chuba Hubbard and LD Brown, 2 of the fastest guys on the football field, although I've heard rumors that LD Brown might be the fastest Cowboy on the field. And then something for West Virginia to watch will be their rushing. A year ago, they were the fourth worst rushing team in FBS. So with that, Oklahoma State has the edge offensively, and I think we will send it out one more time to Alex.
All right, guys, it's about 10 minutes to kick off. As you can see behind me, fans are starting to pile into the stadium. The energy is building here at Boone Pickens Stadium. Some keys to the game for today with the Oklahoma State Cowboys is definitely just to stay healthy. I know that's a pretty obvious one, but the injury last week with Spencer Sanders definitely threw the whole team for a loop. Coach Gundy said it was as if the team was playing musical chairs, just trying to find that rhythm, find the players that click together. So he's hoping that everyone can stay healthy and they can find their groove earlier in the game to allow our offense to score more points than we did last week. It's going to be a battle of the Oklahoma State O-line versus the West Virginia D-line, and so hopefully that our O-line is able to hold them and give our stars like Tylan Wallace and Chuba Hubbard and Dylan Stoner those opportunities to move the ball down the field. Speaking of Tylan Wallace and Dylan Stoner, West Virginia has some inexperienced cornerbacks on their defense, and so we should be looking for Tylan Wallace and Dylan Stoner to take advantage of that, get some key plays moving the ball down the field and into the end zone. My prediction for this game is going to be 28-17 Oklahoma State. I think that our team is just has the edge over them in more categories. And with this extra week of practice, although like I said, it is still unconfirmed who our starting quarterback will be, the team has been preparing this week if it is Illingworth, or just in some case that Illingworth has to enter the game at any point if Spencer needs to step out. The receivers and the running backs have been able to work with him this week, and the coaching staff and the team's confident coming into this game. As always, go Pokes. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. It's important to acknowledge that the Pokes have lost their past 4 Big 12 openers, though 3 were to ranked opponents, and West Virginia is not ranked, I believe.
Yeah, also Oklahoma State is 5-0 against West Virginia in their last 5 games. So that's another thing to watch. They've really dominated this matchup, and even though they haven't fared well in Big 12 openers.
Absolutely. And we're going to send it back to the desk one more time for buy or sell. It is that time of the show. Adam, what do we have for buy or sell this week?
Well, that is right. It is time for our favorite segment, buy or sell. Let's start off smooth with Oklahoma State defense +3 sacks. Lainey, we will start with you. Are you going to buy that, or are you going to sell?
Ooh, I'm going to buy it because West Virginia's offensive line, as Parker mentioned before, is pretty liquid. Yeah, they're kind of easy to get to. So, I mean, I would buy it. I wouldn't be super quick to sell it.
Parker?
I'm also going to buy that out.
Okay.
Adam, I think that Trace Ford's going to have a bounce-back game. And even though you ribbed me a little bit for how I treated Calvin Bundage earlier, I do think that he may have a big game as well. As you said, he hasn't played football in a whole year. So he's probably going to come back. He's got some reps under his belt now and some snaps. And I think that both of those guys can wreak havoc. Edmond Santa Fe products can both wreak havoc on this West Virginia offense.
All right. So, L.D. Brown was so close to scoring a touchdown. I mean, he did last week, but it was negated for a penalty. So, does he score at least one touchdown today, Lainey?
Oh, I buy it. I would put a lot of money on that one. I would buy it 3 times, actually, because I think he'll get around 3 touchdowns. Like I said, they're going to,
times 3.
every defense is going to stack Chuba. And so it's going to be LD coming in. Again, there's that backup narrative around him, so they're not going to be as focused on him. So I think that I mean, we basically saw him score a touchdown last week, so I think he could do it at least 3 more times. West Virginia's defense is really good, but, I mean, LD is really good at hesitating for just a moment to where he could fit through a crack and make his way through.
Parker, buy or sell?
I'm buying this as well. Adam, I keep wanting to call you Alex. She's at the studio, but I like LD Brown, especially in short yardage situations. I know that they brought in Chuba last week for those very scenarios, but I think that they're going to, because of how well LD Brown did, and he showed the coaches that he's really good too. They're going to give him some more snaps inside that red zone, and I can definitely see him with his newfound burst and newfound ability to find the holes to get a touchdown. Hopefully we see both him and Chuba get some touchdowns today.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Spencer Sanders does play today. Buy or sell?
Whew. That's a tough one.
I'm selling it, Adam. I don't think that he's going to play today. We've talked about it a lot. I think that this is a game where he was warming up. He's got his pads on, but it's all just kind of trickery to make West Virginia think that he's going to suit up and play. But they're just going to keep him out if they can. If things go south, then they may put him in. But I don't see Spencer Sanders playing today. I think he's going to rest and recuperate.
Mm-hmm. I also think I'm going to sell it. If there were an in-between option, I would definitely take the in-between option, but there isn't. So I'm going to sell it because, like you said, I think that they were just toying with them. We've seen other teams like Hawaii a couple years ago literally had their backup quarterback warm up in their starting quarterback's jersey just to toy with the opposing team. So I think that that's what Spencer's whole thing was today. He didn't have the boot on, even though he probably should be wearing a boot right now. And I think it was just to toy with West Virginia. So like you said, also, I think he's just going to come in if things start heading south. But I don't think they'll hopefully not get bad enough for Spencer to have to come in. So, yeah, I'm going to sell it. I think Shane's going to be our guy today.
All right, and our final buy or sell proposal, West Virginia quarterback Jarrett Doege throws for 250-plus passing yards. Parker, buy or sell?
Sell, Adam. I think that the secondary is the best that he's faced in a long time. I know we talked about last year that he had over 250 yards passing against us, but that was a totally different team than we have now. We have a lot more experience, and I would put our secondary up with anyone in the Big 12 and perhaps anyone in the country. We have a lot of experience, and we have a guy in Colby Harvell-Peel that's going to be on the end of the year watch lists for sure. I mean, maybe Trey Sterling will as well. And again, the forgotten third guy, Tanner McAllister, a team captain for today's game. I think Jarrett Doege is going to be seeing ghosts, as one quarterback at one point said in an NFL game, and I think that we're going to contain him as best that we can, especially in the secondary.
Mm-hmm. I'm also going to sell it. Tanner McAllister had a great pass breakup in the end zone last week that prevented Tulsa from going up 13-10 or 14-10 if they make the PAT after. And I think he's just going to keep doing the same thing. Colby Harvell-Peel, he did allow a touchdown last week, but I think he probably is reliving that over and over and over again in his head because he could have had it. So I think that our secondary is just going to be elite, and Jarrett Doege is very much a passing quarterback. So I think they're just going to have it on lock for the most part.
All right, thank you so much. With that, I think we are going to our predictions, I believe, for today's game. So for me, it will be a prediction very similar to Alex, although one more point than what she had for Oklahoma State. One less. I'm going to go Oklahoma State 27-17.
Lainey, I guess everyone now is just going to go low after just taking my cue from last week, just having a lower score. But no,
We
I
all
understand.
want to be you.
No, I understand that without Spencer Sanders, without our starting quarterback, things might be lower in the scoring department. We see that, of course, in the betting line. The over-under is set to be pretty low for this game, and that always happens when there's a backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I don't really remember the score that I sent into our graphics gal, but I'm going to say 28-14, Oklahoma State.
Okay.
I'm going to go a little bit lower on West Virginia's score than everyone else, but I am going to go a little bit higher at that 28 for Oklahoma State. So, again, another low-scoring game. I think Illingworth manages it as best that he can, and we spread the ball out a lot. The offensive line is upset about last week, and they show that they can make holes for these two-star running backs. We control the clock, and we control the game, and we make it out of there with 2-touchdown win.
I like it. That seems solid. That's a very you prediction. I am going with, so I thought of my score kind of earlier in the week when I had more time to think about it, and I predicted 35-17 OSU. I was very optimistic for Spencer earlier in the week, and then I looked up high ankle sprains more. But I think Shane still has the ability to score 35. I think we're going to have a lot of our receivers in, and I think that we're really going to be able to control it. Like you said, we'll control the clock. We're going to, like, LD Brown's going to find those cracks. He's going to find those holes. He's going to see more playing time, even if, like, Chuba doesn't. I think Shane and Tylen have a really good thing going with their fade passes. I think 35-17 is doable. I could very much see West Virginia scoring 17 points for sure on us.
I remembered what I sent in, so I'm glad that I still have that same train of thought. Lainey, one quick thing. Oklahoma and Kansas State is tied at 35, and Kansas State is driving late in the fourth quarter. Just something to watch out for, the number 3 Sooners.
A Big 12 upset. Sooners go
Possible.
down, OSU could go up. I'm liking how that's looking.
Yeah.
All right, Lainey. That's all that I've got for today.
That's all you got. Adam, any closing remarks on your final score?
Nope. Nothing else here except like you mentioned, Parker, we are going to keep a close eye onto the action that is happening in Norman. But other than that, I'm done here.
We need to keep an eye out for this game, Lainey, Oklahoma State. It's something that would be like a trap game in the past, and we've lost to West Virginia before. In 2013, that really good season. So they've got to be focused today on both sides of the ball.
Like we mentioned, OSU has lost the past 4 Big 12 openers. So hopefully this is the year that they change that. We're about 2 minutes until kickoff. So make sure you guys tune in to ABC for that game and root for our Pokes. Thank you so much for watching the pregame report again this week, and we'll see you next week. Have a good game day.
Oh, there you go. Superstar.
The end of the practice is when we do all of our, like, intensity drills.
Okay.
She was going at it.
Stop. If we get them to Detroit by, let's say, like Monday the 15th. Time's right there. There we go. Yeah. Just, you can't.
Don't want to talk about it.
When you see the water tower, you're gonna make a right.
If we win this, we have one way to get to the playoffs.
I know.